Okay, Counselor, you're good to go.
Thank you. Is everybody on? I see Counselor Garcia, Counselor Beta, Counselor Vigil Koppler, and Counselor Lindell, I believe.
And Counselor Garcia is on as well.
Yes, I saw him.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Give me a second to pull up the agenda here on my phone. Very good. Let's call the regular meeting of Public Works and Utilities Committee for Monday, June 8th to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Here.
Counselor Romana Beta,
Here.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Joanne Vigil Koppler,
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Let's have approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff? Mr. Romero,
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones?
There are no changes, Chair. Thank you.
All right, what are the wishes of the committee? Any changes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval of the agenda by Counselor Lindell and a second by Counselor Vigil Koppler. Can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vigil Koppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff? Mr. Jones?
There are no changes from us, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Romero?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, is there anything the committee would like to pull? There were a number of items that were emailed to me that I passed on to staff. So for the record, Counselor Lindell, what would you like to pull tonight?
Item C, Chair, and item G. And item I.
Okay, Counselor Vigil Koppler.
Thank you, Chair. Item A, M, and Q.
Very good. Counselor Garcia.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull item G, O, and R.
All right, and Counselor Beta, anything you would like to pull?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve as amended.
Seconded.
Motion for approval is amended by Counselor Vigil Koppler, a second by Counselor Garcia. And I believe there were Counselor Lindell and Vigil Koppler that wanted to co-sign on item R. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote. Ms. Martin?
Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vigil Koppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now, approval of the minutes from May 26, 2020, Public Works and Public Utilities meeting. Any changes from staff? Mr. Jones,
We had no changes, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Romero,
No changes, Mr. Chair.
any changes from the committee?
Move to
Wishes
approve. Move to
Second.
approve, Mr. Chair.
A motion for approval from Councilor Garcia and a second from Councilor Vihel Coppler. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote. Ms. Martin?
Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
yes,
Councilor Signe Lindell,
yes,
Councilor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes,
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next up, public comment. Anything from Ms. Pisula that you've received?
No, Mr. Chair.
Anything from Ms. Ray Diaz?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have no public comment tonight. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. The first thing was item A. Councilor Vihel Coppler, you pull that.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask about this contract in general and more so about these anaerobic digesters and just, bringing up how it appears we keep having issues at the wastewater plant. So I note as I go through these documents, page 16 of 41 on our little page things, it has, different change orders, most of them dealing with price. Then it has 3 change orders that are more explicit. And I just wondered how, it seems like some of these items could have been anticipated. Maybe they weren't anticipated, but I think it's important to dig deeper into the wastewater plant and what's really happening over there. Because all of the issues that we have coming to the forefront, including our last agenda item today. And I just wanted staff to speak a bit to this because it seems like many of these change orders are coming up. I know it affects the wastewater plant, and maybe they could have been anticipated. So I'm wondering if anybody can just speak to that.
Mr. Jones, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Vihel, I'll try to provide an overview. We do have a project manager and wastewater staff also available. So definitely in a project at the scale of this, I do believe change orders are evident. Is retrofitting an existing facility, so there are assumptions that do have to be made. And I know that some of the change orders are actually decreases as the project progresses and field decisions are made. For staff to be able to do that. One specific change order that I would like to speak to is change order number 2. I know it's really been a while, but as part of the original project, the facility was originally piped for 3 belt presses. Only 2 were installed originally on the composting project. And so as part of the digester project, we were installing the 3rd and final belt press. As those bids went out and we were dealing with the manufacturer of the belt press, it was our intention, even identified in our CIP, there was a replacement schedule for the other 2 that were around 10 to 12 years old. And while the manufacturer was actually putting the bids in to construct the 3rd one, we were actually able to include a 2nd belt press for about half price. So we did come before the governing body and ask for change order 2. I think it was really an opportunity in the timing. We had a contractor who was mobilized and a manufacturer who was giving us a discount of building a belt press to go with 2, which is something that we would have had to do in the next couple of years. So that's what triggered change order number 2. Some of the other change orders I know were time sensitive or was adding time to the project. This particular change order I know has several components that are included in there. And if I could, I would rather, if it's specifics about the items in the change order 4, I would like to defer to the project manager as they could probably speak more intelligent about the actual items.
Thank you, Shannon. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vihel-Coppler. I do see that you did manage to find the second page of the memo, which is the one that was on page 16 in the packet. It got shuffled to the back somehow. But that's really the description on that page that talks about the past change orders 1, 2, and 3. And then it gives some more description about the one that's here. Shannon said up until now, the largest one was the belt press. This one has to do with a number of things that have come up during the balance of the construction. We're at about 95% complete now. And the cogen and the gas cleaning system are going to be started up in July. So that's scheduled now. A lot of this was delayed because of COVID. Before that, it's mainly odds and ends that we started doing during startup. That happened probably, startup was mainly in January. Probably the largest one on here was had to do with the digester foaming. And there was an exchange of sludge back and forth between the digesters and the biological treatment system that didn't, that probably interfered with the settling, which is one of the problems that the treatment plant has been having. That's calmed down now. It was just startup, getting used to the new system, and the plant is running better. But for the most part, the digester project was envisioned probably 5 years ago, and it really didn't specifically address any of the issues that the plant is having now with the solids and the disinfection that's giving us the reuse problems and permit compliance. Anything else I could address? I'd be happy to go into more detail.
Well, it's interesting to find the second page of the memo on page 16. So when you have that kind of disorganization, you kind of wonder, what something so simple, what about everything else? So that kind of led me to my question. And this is a very expensive contract. And yet it seems like we are, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And I just want to make sure and that, somebody is managing this and that it's coming to conclusion where we have some light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why I pulled it off the agenda, because I think it's important to look into the detail. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I want to hear from Efren, who manages our wastewater treatment plant. And will this in any way help with the treated effluent issue that we've had? Efren?
Mr. Chair, councilors, these are change orders to the belt press and to the digester project. We've been having to troubleshoot the filters and the UV disinfection, and we've come across a few things that we've caught. So it is improving. We are making changes to the system to better, to improve the quality of the water effluent going out.
Okay, so will this contract help us be in a better position to provide water on a weekly, daily basis to those users?
Mr. Chair, councilors, this in essence will assist us with that. With the digesters, we have solids removal from the system. And if we have the proper capacity of the digesting units, then we do have enough solids removal. So yeah, yes, it will help.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lindell, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really do hope that it helps. We're going to have $14 million into this, and I think I speak for everyone that we all expect that it will help. So this project will be completed by July? That's a question.
The startup will be complete in July. We're going to then put the cogen aside. We still don't have the connection approved with PNM. They have a very, very long application and review time, and we're still working with them on that. And there will be some changes, some construction changes that we'll have to make to our primary electric system so that the cogen will operate to the most efficient stage possible. But that'll occur over the next couple months.
Okay. I'd like to take a look at page 15 of 41 in the packet. And on MCR number 41, startup costs through 3/31/20. I don't really understand why startup costs would have to be a change order. How is it that no one knew that we had startup costs? Why are those extra costs to us in this contract? It's not inexpensive. It's $50-some thousand.
Counselor, that's true, and what that includes a number of things that were unanticipated in the original bid. We do have a contingency in here to handle things like this. For example, the digester foaming and some miscellaneous tools and testing that we needed to be able to do on site to make sure that the digesters were starting up properly without going to a laboratory outside. That all worked fine, but we had the defoamer costs. We had several orders of defoamer that really calmed things down, but it took a while. As you know, it's a biological system. The detention time in our digesters is about 20 days. And so once we start making a change, it's actually a month or two before we start to see the positive benefit of that change. And we're there now. We haven't had foaming problems in a month, and things have really calmed down nicely on the digester side of things.
I have to tell you, when I hear that it takes a month or two to see a difference, it makes my heart sink a little bit, considering what we've been going through. Councilor Vigil Koppler stated that this is an expensive project. I think that we all expect to have results from this, and that this will address the problems that we've been facing for the last couple of years. And it's a huge amount of money, really. And I hope it is properly designed and that we can implement, and that we can move past these pretty dramatic problems that we've been continuously having. So that's all from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell. Any other questions from committee members? See none, hear none. What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
A motion for approval from Counselor Vihil Coppler, a second from Counselor Beta. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin.
Counselor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Linda-
Coun-
Lindell's a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Lindell. All right, we're on to item C, which is pulled by Counselor Lindell. Is that correct, Counselor Lindell? Was it item C?
Correct. I'm just trying to get there, going between screens. Thank you. My question on it is, we have a addition on this. I think it's $250,000 increase on soccer fields. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, it's actually transferring general obligation bond money from Swan Park to Soccer Valley.
Can you just give us some insight to why we're doing that?
Yes, definitely. So it's a very good question. We're not, I guess, spending another $250,000. We're transferring it over. That money was originally intended for Swan Park. Swan Park's original budget was $599,000. And what that $599 was going to get us was only design of a lot of improvements. Design of a concession stand area, bathrooms, a roadway. And what we thought would be better use of that, at least for the time being, is to do some low-hanging fruit. And so we reduced the scope in Swan Park to only include horseshoe pits, things like horseshoe pits. I apologize, I'm pulling up my memo. I don't remember these off the top of my head. So
That's all right. They're in our packet, John.
okay, yeah. So anyways, so now those that revised scope will be designed and constructed at a cost $250,000 less than the $599. So with that proposed savings, it's general obligation bond money, so it can only be used on parks or trails. So we're proposing to move it to the MRC Soccer Valley project to help aid with the scope of that project.
John, I thought that we had a GIS irrigation assessment of all of the MRC within the last couple of years. And we also had a very clear assessment of where our irrigation system was in need of repair and where our leaks were and that kind of thing, because that was in the request that we made to the Santa Fe delegation this year. Am I wrong on that we have that irrigation assessment?
We have Sam Burnett. He may be able to provide more information regarding that. Are you there, Sam?
I mean, my understanding was that we had a complete GIS assessment of irrigation at the MRC.
I don't have that information, Counselor. I apologize for that, but I can follow up with Sam and possibly Jen Romero to see exactly why we're proposing to redo the GIS survey of that irrigation system.
Okay, I think Jen would be the person that would know about that. Jen and John Munoz. Could you check on that and get back to us? I mean, it was a pretty sizable document that we got on that, and I thought that it did cover the entire MRC.
Okay, definitely. I'll get that information back to you, Counselor.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on item C?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Beta.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Councilor Lindell for bringing this issue up. Regarding Swan Park, Councilor, both the chairman and I have met several times over the past probably 18 months now with residents in District 3 that utilize Swan Park. The changes in the design is consistent with what we've discussed. And our thinking with Mr. Romero was, since we have enough to get us with a second phase design, but not enough to do much more than that, we thought that we would go ahead and support the design change this time. And then instead of just having the remaining money just sit there until we had enough to do something else that was substantial, we were okay with it being moved for this other purpose. But again, thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Beta. And Sam Burnett, are you on? I'm showing that you're on the list of attendees. All right, maybe not, but I think Councilor Lindell is correct. There was an assessment done, and I think there was a pitch made for that if we could upgrade our sprinkler system, that we could save a substantial amount of water. And I think that was what our legislative delegation was extremely interested in. So it would be great to have that question answered. So thank you, Councilor Lindell.
In fact, Chair, I think the delegation did fund it and the governor vetoed it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so what are your wishes on item C, Councilor Lindell?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilor Lindell, a second by Councilor Vihel Coppler. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on to item G, which is pulled by both Councilor Garcia and Councilor Lindell. Councilor Garcia, will let you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only had one question on this. I see last year there was roughly 1.08 million appropriated for this, and this year it's asking for an increase of nearly 540,000. Get clarification why such a drastic increase of nearly $1 million.
Bill, are you on?
I am on. Excuse me, Councilor, Mr. Chairman. I was looking for my tracking sheet. The PO for this year was actually 1.6 million and change. The initial PO was 1.08 million. And that's why we had asked for the 1.6 million for the next year. We have a major piping project that's going to take 1.75 years to 2 years of funding to be able to get done.
Okay, that clarifies for me. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Lindell, you also had questions on this?
Yes, thank you. My question is pretty simple. In today's world, have we tried to renegotiate this some, and or have we looked for new bids on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell. We are working with our subcontractor Subsurface to see where we can save money. They have had raises in their cost of doing business for materials over the last 2 years that have not been reflected in the contract. I do not know yet how much give we can find, but I will definitely investigate it.
Well, I think that in today's world, it's reasonable to do that. You know, these are sizable amounts of money, and if we could save 10% on it, it would be very meaningful to the city this year.
Councilor Lindell, I hear you, and I'll see what I can do. It'll take probably a few days to find out, but I'll see what we can get reported back.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve, Chair.
Second.
A motion for approval from Councilor Garcia, a second from Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin.
Counselor Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, now we're on to item I, which was pulled by Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. My question on this is, I mean, we've been wrestling with this software forever. Are we trying to modify this software to meet some criteria special that we're asking for? Or is there a possibility that if we are, could we not find a way to use this off the shelf and modify what we're doing? It just seems like this contract has gone on forever. And the second part of that is, do we have any ability to continue with where we are right now and not spend this money for another year?
Hi, Councilor Lindell. This is Nancy. Sorry that I don't have video on my computer. So to answer your first question, the City of Santa Fe purchased version 3 from Advanced back in 2013 for about $1,033,000. And what this amendment is, back in 2013, that version 3 did not address or was not capable of billing mainly the refuse, the trash and the recycling, to the extent that the city charges with different size dumpsters and roll-offs and recycling bins and, you know, the curbside service. So that was a hiccup that happened with the initial contract for Advanced. In several, obviously, years going forward, Advanced has moved to their version 4. We do believe at this point that it will now be able to bill with very little modifications for all of the water. Obviously the trash, which was kind of the hiccup back in 2013 and 14, with as little modification as possible so that it works for the City of Santa Fe. We get what we need, and then of course we don't have to modify Advanced's billing system, which is where kind of the hiccups were happening. The second question, to continue with where we are at right now with the AS400 and our billing system, if we push this potentially another year, I would be very leery about pushing The current AS400 system, my understanding is if it does fail at any time, there is no backup. It's not like we can do an upgrade to the AS400, kind of like a Windows 7 versus a Windows 10. There is not any support out there for the AS400 any longer. So I would be very, very leery about trying to push this system. It's a 19 to 21-year-old system right now. We are having just a couple of struggles with billing every Thursday. There always seems to be some kind of new issue that we have to address on those Thursday bills, so that we can get the bills out correctly in time, so that everybody does have it, when it's required. So I know it's a huge dollar amount to be asking for in this critical kind of crazy time. But I do truly believe that if we don't move this forward, I'm really afraid of what the dollar amount could be, over the next couple of months or into the future if we don't get this moving forward.
So when is the rollout of the new system? When do we stop depending on the AS system?
So this implementation would be a 14-month implementation. Basically 12 months to get the system up and running, double billing, not double billing, but making sure that the bills are going out correctly in the old system versus the new system. So that would be about 12 months. And then 2 months of, I guess what you could say, to try and break the system. Before then we are just turned over to kind of the advanced help desk. So we would have individuals basically on site or at our beck and call for 14 months.
I don't operate systems like that, but doesn't 14 months for a system like this to get implemented seem like an awfully long time?
With the antiquated system that we have currently, I would absolutely say definitely not. I would say 6 months to make sure that we first of all understand and that the system can bill correctly. I would say the next 2 or 3 months would be to challenge the system and try and break it and say, okay, now we have this new account, and to set this up and to make sure that everybody's trained on it. And then of course you have to go through about a 3 or 4 month trial system. And basically what that is we will bill out of both systems and make sure that both of those bills are 100% accurate. And they basically say the exact same thing in our current system and in the new system. I would hate to ever not do a test and send out a bill that's wrong, just because we want to push through a new system. I've been with the city for 24 years. I know the conversion to the old E1 system with payroll. There were 6 months worth of issues there because we never really did a dual testing process. And then of course we did have some hiccups with Munis just in the most recent past. So I definitely agree that we need to have this 12 to 14 month process to make sure that these bills go out 100% correct and that we don't have any any issues, double billing or anything like that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding item I?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Villa-Coppler.
I wanted to ask Nancy Jimenez a question, and this is coupled with the contract we discussed not too long ago, maybe at our last meeting, where we have contracted with a company to enter records from the AS400 into, is it into this system so that we can make it more accurate? How are the two related?
Yeah, so the Mountain River, I believe, is the contract that you're asking about. And yes, they are an integral part of this transition. They actually can pull all of the queries and the reports and the information that we need from the AS400, which is our current system, and actually be able to transfer that information, the 20 years of history, into the proper computer language, for lack of a better term, from the old antiquated AS400 into the new advanced, drop-down system. So yeah, they are a large part of understanding the backbone and the back end of the software package, so that we make sure that the transition of current data go into the new system with the most accurate information as possible.
So, and we kind of shortchanged that contract, but I guess we can see how it goes. But if we don't do this and we don't enter good data into this system, then this system isn't going to be as good as it could be. And it's not going to improve on our billing system. So they are really tied together. And is the AS400 that green screen?
Yes, Counselor.
So, I think many of you remember those green screens, and that's what we're working with right now. So I think it's really important to move into the future and have accurate billings. And I think it will probably help us improve on our collections. And, this is a lot of money, but it's not good to be penny wise and pound foolish. So I very much support this and be glad when it's over. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
All right, I had a question.
Councilor Garcia.
My question's for Nancy. So you kind of gave a good metaphor earlier in regards to Windows 7 and Windows 10. And I'm assuming you're meaning that this advanced version number 4 is Windows 10. But so what happens when Advanced comes out with the version 5, version 6, version 7? Does that leave us outdated and not getting support?
Well, just with any, computer system, even the Munis system that we have for financials, there is quarterly updates and quarterly upgrades that happen. It is part of the contract. And then after, of course, the 14 months of implementation and testing, we will still have a maintenance agreement, that will come with any type of software that you do have, which also will include any upgrades if they do a version 4.5 or a version 5 or 6. And you're going to have that with, with any type of software packages that you purchase. New things come, they tweak things. They find that, from one customer to the next, this might work a little bit better if they do this, or that. So yes, there will be a maintenance, upgrade contract that we'll still have to come forward with, for maintenance every year, just like any other type of software that the city has.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Vihel Coppler and a second by Councilor Garcia. Any further discussion? We have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Council Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And, just so all of you know, I mean, this is this is almost the feeling of spending money we don't have. And I think that's why there's so many questions and so many concerns about things that are coming up. And, you know, I assume these contracts are going to be looked at a little more harshly as we move through, especially at the mid-year time, where we probably have more information on our budget. Just so everybody knows, this is a difficult time and difficult votes for us. So thank you. We're on to item M, which was pulled by Councilor Vihel Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Councilor Carol Romero-Worth for being here. I had a question about, there's a current committee or somewhat related committee to this committee that you're proposing?
Councilor Rivera, with your permission.
Yes, Councilor Romero-Worth.
So as you all know, I'm not a member of the committee, but I did want to be here. We also have Christine Chavez, who's the Water Conservation Division Director, on the line as well. So we do currently have the Water Conservation Committee. This resolution in front of us is to combine, let's see, it says in the resolution 3 or 4 resolutions that have been passed. The earliest one in 2002, another one in 2008, then one in 2016, and another one in 2016. And so what we're trying to do is, it's gotten kind of cumbersome, because in order to know what's happening with this committee, you've got to refer to 4 different resolutions. So we want to reissue one resolution that combines all those changes. And then in addition, what this does that we don't currently have is that it extends the number of terms a committee member can serve from 2 terms to 3 terms. So currently, committee members can serve 2 two-year terms, and we are asking that they be allowed to serve 3 two-year terms. And the biggest reason for this is that we have really struggled to find people to serve on this committee, oddly enough. And it takes a while to kind of get up to speed on the topic of water policy in the city, given the complexity. And we also, under the current governance structure, we lose about half the committee. And it's just both in terms of institutional memory and being up to speed on the topic and filling those vacancies. It's just been too difficult. So this change will help us not to lose so many people all at once, and hopefully create some stability in the way the committee runs.
Okay, so that you kind of answered my other question, was what work did the current committee do, which sounds like it was a little bit scattered. And then the members that you do have on the current committee, what happens to them? Are their terms ending, or do we?
Great question. And the work of this committee has not been scattered. It's just the resolutions, there are too many of them now, and it's just be easier if you could refer back to one resolution. This is actually a very important committee for the city and for our water conservation, water policy efforts. But great question on what happens. So this is part of the reason why this is before you now, before those current members' terms expire. They would be essentially grandfathered in, and they would be allowed to serve that 3rd term. So we're not changing the makeup of the committee. We're just trying to get this in place before their terms expire so that they would have that additional term.
Okay, and that's if they want to continue, right? I mean,
correct.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Romero-Worth. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor Beta.
if I could just be added as a co-sponsor, thank you.
Sure. Christine, I think Councillor Ives had some concerns about this committee. Can you verify that and let us know what they were?
Mr. Chair, I can follow up with him to see what concerns he's have. I don't know of any.
All right. Didn't he sponsor some resolutions in the past to either do away with this committee or to repurpose it in some way? Or am I thinking about a different committee?
Mr. Chair, if I can, he was the chair of this committee for quite a while, I believe. Christine, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, did he want to repurpose it in some way, Christine?
Mr. Chair, not that I've ever heard of. He sponsored a lot of different ordinances and resolutions out of this committee in the past. I wasn't part of that discussion with him, but I can follow up if you'd like and just see if there was anything that he wanted to add or.
No, that's okay. I may be thinking of a different committee, so I'm fine with this actually. So, and support Councillor Romero Worth in this effort. All right. Any other questions?
Move
All
to
right. All right. Motion for approval from Councillor Viejo Coppler. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councillor Lindell, I believe. So, any further discussion? All right. Can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're on the item O, which was pulled by Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just got a quick question for Mr. Burnett. So last year there was 250K appropriated. Now you're or double that for next year. Brings the contract up to 750K. Any clarification for the drastic increase?
Mr. Chair, Councillor Garcia, there are a few reasons behind this. The first is the original contract with B&D for preventative maintenance from last year was actually signed fairly late into the year. I believe it was actually, I'm looking at it right now. I think the mayor signed it on January 28th, 2020. I believe I'm looking at the right contract, and kind of gives you a sense of timing. So a couple pieces here. First, the original contract was not in place for a full year. The second piece is the way I wrote the contract also allows our facilities maintenance team to use this contract to open POs to address issues that come up in other city facilities throughout the city. So it's not entirely specific to Midtown. And then the third piece would be, as we enter into the disposition with the selected master developer, we have been holding on to a grant, some grant monies in the amount of about $750,000 to assist with any potential infrastructure improvements that would need to take place to kind of the front end to help drive the disposition. And so I've kind of adjusted the contract, one, to account for the extended period of time we'll be using it, two, to allow my colleagues in facilities maintenance and the CIP project managers to also draw upon this contract, and then three, to make sure we have enough in place should anything arise during negotiations or the disposition. I think I just repeated myself, but that's the gist of it. And any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
No, Mr. Burnett, I thank you for the clarification. So with that, are we expecting to see any cost savings elsewhere, since these resources you said can be utilized beyond Midtown?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how necessarily this would translate into cost savings. As a point of clarification with facilities maintenance and how, maintenance of city facilities works, if our maintenance staff runs into a challenge that's, beyond the scope of what they're able to achieve, they'll turn those issues over to one of the facilities, CIP or capital improvement project administrators, who will then work with a contractor to address the issue. For example, if a large piece of HVAC equipment or something like that was to go down on a building, it's really beyond the ability, not technical ability, but just kind of manpower hours, so to speak, for our maintenance staff to handle. So we would then do it with a private contractor. And I guess the only way I could see, I kind of always see those as expenses. We do try and always, when we're replacing equipment, if it's HVAC equipment, we try and get more efficient equipment. If it's lighting, we try to switch to LED. So there is always opportunities for savings, but these kind of expenses aren't necessarily savings driven. They're kind of the day-to-day functionality of the city's infrastructure. And that more or less, that's the answer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burnett. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other questions from committee members? All right. What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval from Councilor Garcia, second from Councilor Lindell. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councilor Amana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, Sam. Next on to item Q, which was pulled by Councilor Vihel Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at this and I don't know that it's appropriate to make amendments here because this is an ordinance. So, but I wanted to point out that if you look on page 1, item 1, it says people must clean up, and then you go down and on item 4, it goes dog owners. And then on item 5, it goes back to people. And then you go back down and number 10, it goes back to people. So I'm not, I know I'm being picky, but I don't know if it should be dog owners or it should be all dog owners or all people. And I'm not sure, maybe Councilor Lindell can explain if there's a difference or why we're using different language here.
I couldn't tell you why we're using different language. When I look at this, all this amendment, all this was to change a improper reference. When I look at it, it says, where it says people must clean up after their pets. So, I mean, you could, if you want to do an amendment that says pet owners on these or,
Well, I don't know if it's, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's appropriate because it's an ordinance and don't we have to have public hearings and all that stuff? I don't know.
I think that it covers what you're asking. I think that this is old. It was done a pretty long time ago in probably almost 20 years ago, but I'm sure you could bring an amendment to it if you'd like to.
Well, I think the idea is, do we change all the people words to dog owners? And what if someone doesn't own that dog, but they just have it? Does that mean they're excluded?
I'm I'm gonna let you wrestle with that,
Oh,
Counselor.
come on. Well, it says dog owners or those having charge or custody of a dog. Now that's good. So maybe we should just use that language everywhere where it says people. I think Jesse's here somewhere. Maybe he can help. But anyway, we have a chance to clean it up. And so I just figured, why not take it? Or we could just leave it sloppy. I'm not sure. I don't think everybody's probably looking at their clock. I mean, I guess we all know what it means, but it's sloppy. Counselor,
Yeah.
you got something to say about this? No.
Who are you asking, Counselor?
Counselor Beta. He doesn't have anything to say. Okay. Well,
Councilor Lindell, does this still have to go through the 30-day request to publish?
Yeah, I'm sure it does, doesn't it, Jesse?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Counselor, it is scheduled for a request to publish on Wednesday.
So Councilor Vihil Coppler, I think there's plenty of time for you to make those requested changes through Jesse. You can put an amendment sheet forward and either tie in all the language so it's the same or do whatever you think is correct.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval from Councilor Lindell, a second from Councilor Vihil Coppler. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Counselor Monabeta,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we're on item R, which was pulled by Councilor Garcia. And before we get started, I just would like to say that I am requesting this just simply because our effluent is so inconsistent. So we're not able to provide effluent on a consistent basis. And there are times, typically after 7 days, where both the Santa Fe Country Club, our soccer fields, our rugby fields, our golf course are in jeopardy of really losing some or part of their facilities. So at one point we were looking at if one of our courses lost a green, specifically at the city golf course, it would cost close to $1 million to replace. So this is just an attempt to protect our assets in those times where effluent cannot be provided. And from what we heard from Efren and from Mr. Jones tonight, hopefully some of the changes that we're making will limit the amount of time that effluent is not available. But if that happens, or until that happens, we have a backup plan so we don't have to have an emergency meeting in order to provide water to those facilities. And just so everyone knows, every other city facility besides the one I just mentioned are watered with potable water. So this is only on an emergency basis where they would be allowed to use potable water when effluent was not available. So Councilor Garcia, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing forth this resolution. My first question is, how many customers do we currently have that have been affected by the loss of effluent water?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, A little hard to quantify the number of customers, mainly driven by the contractors. So again, treated effluent is used for dust control and compaction. There are two filling stations located at the water reclamation facility. So when that system is down, it definitely impacts the contractors. They're forced to either move out to the county's fill station. And so again, we're working on finding ways to create robustness for that. As far as turf irrigation, the three locations, and probably the most problematic for us, again, is Swan Park, the MRC, which includes the Marty Sanchez Golf Course and the Santa Fe Country Club. Seems like those have been the three locations with the most challenge of the disruption.
Okay. And I'm assuming the contractors that use effluent have to pay for the effluent water. What about the folks that use the turf irrigation for turf irrigation?
So Swan Park and the MRC, including Sanchez, are city facilities and are currently not charged for the treated effluent. Santa Fe Country Club has an agreement with the city of Santa Fe that they would not be charged for treated effluent as long as they meet the conditions of their agreement. Number one, mostly being that it remains open to the public as a public course, and that their rates be reasonable.
Okay. And so in regards to if effluent is not available, the contractors that usually pay for it would still see a cost for potable water. Would they be included in this?
Yes, they would. That would be correct.
Okay, and then so the three entities or the folks that use it for turf irrigation, they would see a cost that they weren't expecting.
Councilor Garcia, I think maybe not a cost that they had necessarily budgeted for. I think up to this point, including even last year, I feel the city, including the government, has been very concise on the cost of that. We do set the rate at the bulk water rate as part of our ordinance. So they're just charged the 606 per thousand. There's no escalation as in like a residential or commercial rate.
Okay, and so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that when effluent is not available for the entities that are using it for turf irrigation, they see a cost that they weren't expecting. In the instance, if it's our city partners within the Parks and Rec, they've got to figure out where that money is going to come from. With the business of the country club, that's a cost they weren't expecting. So in the instance, which we've kind of went through recently, it's roughly about $5,000 a day. So when they have potentially 5 days without water, that's an unexpected expense of roughly $25,000, right? And so and I hate to have these folks that weren't expecting these costs somewhat be penalized for this. And what I'd like to potentially propose is we cap it off at a certain number of days where the entities that are using it for turf irrigation have to pay to keep the grass green. But then if we can't provide effluent after a certain number of days, then the water company has to take on that expense. And I think, looking at it, something like it after day 5, if effluent is not back and running, to these entities that were utilizing it and expecting it at no cost, I think those charges should be then reverted to the water company, not the user, because it's not their negligence. And I'm not saying it's the negligence of the water company either, but I think it's something that these entities should not incur the cost of. And so I don't know how that would be a proposed amendment to this resolution, Mr. Chair, but I would definitely like to add something like that to this. That way, should effluent not be available for 10, 15 days, we're not potentially putting Parks and Rec in a deep hole that they weren't expecting. or our partners in the community like the country club in the deep pool, which in turn could have negative effects on their business. So I don't know if now is the time if we talk over language for an amendment or if we put something together for Wednesday's meeting. I definitely would like to put something like that though, because I think, like I said, the entities that are using it for turf irrigation should not be penalized, so to speak, when effluent is not available.
Let's see if Mr. Jones has a comment on that. And also, I don't know if Marcos is on or somebody from the attorney's office.
Mr. Chair, I do not believe that Marcos is on the call. I think just a couple of things for consideration as the council kind of mulls this over and considers. One, if possible, if we could look at the delineation between the divisions. So when we talk about treated effluent, that comes from the wastewater management division, has its own rate structure, its own enterprise fund. I think a strong conversation and decisions have to be made about truly what the city is obligated and liable for, which I would defer that to the city attorney's office. In addition, I think my initial comment would be I'm trying to reframe maybe what Councilor Garcia was saying, that a turf irrigator shouldn't be penalized for using potable water. But I think the statement I would make is that, again, the water division and their rates come off a cost of service study. So again, whether water is pumped out of the ground or ran through the Buckman direct diversion, there's a cost that the water division incurs on treating, conveying, and delivering that water. And that is solely supported by the rates of its 35,000 customers. And so I would just at least point out that when any expenditure that's pushed onto the water division is supported by the customer base, and that's any of the three enterprise funds on where that. But I'm happy to also circle back with the city attorney's office to get any information that would help the council and further discussion.
Yeah, and in that, Shannon, if you can also ask about anti-donation, is it legal for us to give free water to a private entity, which may weigh into this as well. Councilor Garcia, you still have the floor.
Sure. So, and I think on that point, it wasn't necessarily, there was a negotiation that where we gave up to so much water to in this case, the country club, in exchange for the public having access to their club. In my understanding, if we're not holding up our end of the bargain and then we're charging them, to me, I think that's where, what is our liability? And I guess that's a question for the attorneys, because if we made an agreement to provide a resource and we're not providing a resource and instead we're asking to now pay for a resource, what is the liability that we have and we're on the hook for? And so I definitely would like to get clarification on that, because like I said, I don't feel, whether it's the country club or our partners with the Parks and Rec department, that they should be held liable for those expenses they weren't planning on because of a challenge that we have. So I don't know if we need to get clarification from the attorneys first before we propose this, or I propose this, but I definitely would like clarification, and it's unfortunate that we don't have Marcos on, because I would like to move forward with having some type of resolution for this.
Mr. Jones, can you get together with the attorney's office and send an answer to committee members by tomorrow sometime?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Councilor Garcia, I will get that information in the morning.
Is that okay, Councilor Garcia?
Sure. On Wednesday, would I be able to introduce an amendment? I want to make sure that this doesn't get lost in the mix before Wednesday, because I do want to, I think this is something practice we shouldn't be moving forward with, in the sense when a product we have is not available, we're basically forcing an entity to purchase something.
Jesse, if an amendment sheet is requested prior to Wednesday night, it can be done up until maybe an hour before the meeting. Maybe you want earlier than that, but what is your recommendation?
Yeah, anytime prior to the meeting, the earlier the better, just so that I can then have Aaron and Marcos review it and then get it out to the rest of the governing body before the meeting.
Okay, just because, I think from my understanding, that's a contract that's in place and we're liable for providing that resource. And if we don't provide it, then what is the options? And so, yeah. I think that's all I have at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Councilor Villegas-Coppler, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Councilor Garcia is onto something, because with the Santa Fe Country Club, the city has had agreements in place with them since, as I recall, the 1950s. And there have been several modifications, but actually the country club land, as I understand it, belonged to the city in the beginning. And then the city didn't want to run the golf course, so they gave it back and said, we'll give you water to water it, or actually effluent. So, there's a bunch of history here. And so it's my understanding and belief that the city, is supposed to be giving them effluent, giving the country club effluent in accordance with all those agreements that come up. So they have been paying like $5,000 every time they hook up to the fire hydrants, and then there's another connection on the other side, and it's costing them, some money. And I think they're not really complaining right now. They understand it, but that's the only choice they have. So I know that the city attorney's office can study this, but I'm roughly, as many of you, I think, are aware of those agreements. And so I don't expect there's going to be much of a difference in the outcome of this, but it seems only fair to live up to our end of the situation. Now, hopefully we don't have this continue to happen and this is a non-issue, but I like your resolution and I want to co-sponsor it. So we'll see what amendments Councilor Garcia comes up with. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not opposed to any amendments as long as they're legal and binding. I'm fine with that. Councilor Lindell, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think that I know that since some amount of time, we've recently been reviewing our contracts, I believe with the country club, also with one of the pueblos on water going out to the downs. And those have all been under review. And I would ask that in proposing, well, you certainly can propose any amendment that you want to, but I would hope that the attorney's office would put that into consideration of where we are with that, and that one doesn't interfere with the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell. Great point. Councilor Beta, you had a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Jones, I think also that at some point, if we're not capable of providing effluent on a regular basis because either it's too complicated or our system's too old, I think at some point we got to just admit that and not provided anymore, and maybe provide potable water to certainly the city facilities, because all the other ones have it. Because it seems like what's frustrating myself and maybe some of the other counselors is these constant shutdowns and not delivering effluent. So I think at some point we need to make the call that maybe we don't do this anymore and we do something else. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Beta. Good point. Mr. Jones, I don't know if you want to comment on that. You don't have to.
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. Councilor Bate, I do hear what you're saying. Again, I go back to, again, the approach that we've been talking about for a year, that we our system, again, it's more than just a single point of use. Right, it is about storage, it's about conservation, and it's about redundancy. So again, with the city facilities, I've been working diligently, definitely the last 2 months, about adding robustness to their system. I guess also, without coming across defensive, I do understand. So like, again, the month of May, in and out of compliance, I get that. We're working to do that better. But I was also pulling the numbers just for the MRC, because I'm working closely with that group. And even with the disruptions that we've had, the month of May, we delivered almost 17 million gallons of treated effluent to that facility. So even if it is a hybrid with robustness and multiple sources, I guess my gut is still that I don't think you can discount the 17 million gallons of water that was delivered. Again, anything that I can do to make that better and more consistent. But even through this time of tribulation that I'm going through, still 17 million gallons of water, which is a valuable resource, you know, in my line of work, that was still delivered for turf irrigation. I do want to do that better, but 17 million gallons is still a lot of water.
Yeah, thank you. And I personally think that we would rather provide treated effluent than potable water. You know, we have plenty of water today, but we've been in times in the past where we were in severe drought, and would hate to get to that point where we're using potable drinking water to provide irrigation to the country club, the MRC, Swan Park, the Downs, anywhere. I think if we can use treated effluent in those situations, that's still the best solution. That's just my personal opinion. So, any other questions? Councilor?
No.
Councilor Garcia?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
A motion for approval from Councilor Garcia, a second from Councilor Vigil Coppler. Councilor Vigil, Coppler, and Lindell, I appreciate you signing on as a co-sponsor. We'll have some more questions answered tomorrow, hopefully by the attorney's office. So we should be ready by Wednesday for any changes, recommended changes, or a vote. All right, any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councilor Romana Beta.
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vigil Coppler.
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Any matters from staff, Mr. Jones?
I have none, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Romero.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to give a brief staffing update. I today received notice that I'm going to be losing another one of my engineers, or actually my only engineer other than myself. Sarah Anderson has decided to move on from the city. And so again, I know we mentioned this in the past, but some of these upper level positions have been very difficult for me to fill. Looking internal, external, to find qualified people is very difficult. I had a very difficult time recruiting at the time that I hired her, and luckily I was able to hire her, and she was an excellent employee. To kind of give perspective of how things have gone, I looked in the org chart for Public Works back in 2011, 2012, that fiscal year, and we had 9 engineers. Right now, we're down to 1, and that's me. So it is a very difficult thing. I will not say, I understand that people are replaceable, but how hard is it to replace? For me, it's very hard to replace these people. I've been trying, there's positions I've been advertising in double digits, 10, 12 times that I cannot fill. So it's just something that I thought was worth mentioning. I know with our upcoming budget talks, I do think retainage of talented employees is going to be a thing that we're going to have to consider with our upcoming budget discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions for Mr. Romero? All right, matters from the committee. Councilor Vihel Coppler. Councilor Garcia.
None, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilor Lindell.
I have nothing, thank you.
Councilor Beta.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, matters from the chair. John, if by next meeting we can have a list of those public works projects that we can send a recommendation to the finance committee for actual either cutting of the budget or deferring somewhere 2-3 years down the road. So specifically the fire station, if that's not going to happen this year, I think this committee needs to make that recommendation to the finance committee that these are the cuts that we propose making during this next fiscal year. And if you can have a list of those and we can talk about those prior to the next meeting that we can actually vote on for submittal to the finance committee.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that. So item C, I had intended to do that. If I could ask, what is your understanding of what item C accomplished?
I think it did some of that, but it didn't. Well, probably because we didn't pull it, we didn't have a appropriate discussion on it. I don't know if there's more items. I don't know if there's anybody that wanted the fire station to continue to be on the discussion. So maybe make it a little clearer. And I don't know if the committee members felt the same way or not.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Vihel Coppler.
we did pull item C.
I don't remember that discussion on it. Did we talk about the fire station specifically or other items?
No, but Councilor Lindell talked about the 250,000 from Swan Park to the MRC.
Right. Okay. So if there were no other changes or discussion on that, Mr. Romero, I think we're fine. So, but just so it's a little bit clearer, I think, to the finance committee that these are the recommendation from the Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one other point of clarification. So what I had intended was that Public Works Committee make the ultimate recommendation on what projects to adjust budgets on, as discussed in item C. And then it would go to finance at the time that it was going to be proposed to be reappropriated for operating expenses. If you would like, I can send that list that we just discussed to finance before that so they can talk about it at a project by project basis. I can do either one.
Councilor Beta, how would you like that to move forward? Would you like it in that format, or do you want to hear it during budget meetings?
No, I would like to hear it first before budget hearings. And I think Mr. Romero's idea, we can talk about project by project.
Okay, that's fine with me. Are you okay, Mr. Romero?
Yes, thank you for the clarification. I'll send it to finance next.
All right. Next, I'd like to introduce a couple of resolutions from the mayor. One is a resolution approving a furlough bridge plan for July 11th through September 4th, 2020, for 4 hours per week for certain city employees and 6 hours for certain city leadership positions. The other one is an ordinance amending section 23-6.2 SFCC 1987 to allow restaurants that have obtained a temporary liquor license modification from the New Mexico Alcoholic Beverage Control Division to serve alcohol on city sidewalk, streets, rights of way, or other property that has been specifically authorized by the city for temporary business use due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So I'll introduce those on behalf of the mayor. Anything else? If not, with that, our next meeting is Monday, June 22nd. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair.